The World Cup has finally come to an end, but the biggest story is only beginning to unfold. Think of this as the final chapter that ties everything together, bringing us back to the early warnings about questionable refereeing decisions and the behind-the-scenes influence that many believed shaped the 2026 tournament. Now, that entire chain of controversy has been dealt what could be its biggest and most devastating blow. It marks a crushing institutional setback for everyone involved, because FIFA's Ethics Committee has now stepped in under its own authority. Acting quickly after receiving a wave of last-minute evidence, they pushed forward with the kind of response they believed this level of alleged misconduct demanded. Gianni Infantino has reportedly lost his executive authority for good. According to these claims, he will never oversee another World Cup again. At the very same time, the Argentine Football Association has reportedly been served with one of the toughest and most detailed disciplinary files ever issued by a FIFA body against a national federation. The investigation centers on two separate cases. The first focuses on an alleged network of backroom favors linking the outgoing FIFA leadership with Argentine officials. Investigators reportedly traced this relationship step by step through a massive collection of evidence gathered throughout the tournament. The second case revolves around the heated incident involving Leandro Paredes and Spain's Gavi and Eric Garcia just as Spain began celebrating after the final whistle. Two sides of a massive controversy that we have followed closely with extensive reporting. Today, those reports have allegedly turned into an official institutional action launched from the highest levels of world football. Yet in the middle of all this chaos came the most heartbreaking development of all. The kind of news that leaves true fans completely devastated. Lionel Messi has officially confirmed his permanent retirement from the Argentine national team. The player who spent decades reminding the world why football is called the beautiful game is now saying goodbye. His final appearance in Argentina's famous blue and white shirt came in what many are calling the most controversial World Cup final ever, against Spain. Even on one of the darkest nights of his career, he chose to step away from the tension surrounding his teammates with the composure and dignity that have always defined him. His farewell to the national team, unfolding alongside what is being described as one of the biggest institutional controversies in modern football history, gives this ending an especially emotional and unforgettable feeling. The dark cloud hanging over the investigation into his own federation, combined with the crushing heartbreak of losing the biggest final of his career, is almost impossible to put into words. It stands as one of the saddest and most painful exits any true icon of this sport has ever been forced to experience. Stay with us until the very end because we are about to break down a raw, detailed analysis of everything that unfolded after the final whistle of one of the most explosive tournaments football has ever witnessed. By the time this video is over, the entire picture will come together. So let's dive straight into the facts. These events are incredibly complex, deeply connected to history, and reveal far more about what this World Cup truly became than most people realize. That's why we need to examine every piece carefully and with the highest level of detail. Let's begin with the Ethics Committee's decision. To fully understand the significance of what happened, we first need to understand the role this committee is supposed to play. What exactly is this body? And what does it mean when its members decide to intervene on their own, without waiting for a formal complaint? Only hours after the biggest match of the year, they serve as FIFA's internal oversight body, responsible for monitoring the conduct of the people who govern world football. Their primary mission is to investigate and discipline senior FIFA officials who violate the organization's code of ethics, at least in principle. They are meant to function independently from FIFA's executive board. In theory, that separation is designed to protect them from political influence, intimidation, and pressure coming from the highest levels of the organization. In reality, however, that independence has often been questioned. Yes, they pursued figures like Blatter and Platini, but many of their biggest actions only came after intense pressure from the media and football supporters around the world. That outside attention often forced FIFA to demonstrate that its internal accountability system was actually working. This time, however, the committee skipped the usual delays and moved directly against Gianni Infantino and the Argentine Football Association. Why did they act so quickly instead of waiting for an official complaint? Because after weeks of non-stop controversy, remaining silent would have made them appear complicit in allegations that many believed were becoming impossible to ignore. Eventually, The pressure surrounding the situation reached a point where it could no longer be dismissed. The accusations of referee bias had become so visible, so heavily debated, and so widely circulated that failing to respond risked creating what many believed would be the biggest damaging credibility crisis ever faced by the governing body of world football. Faced with that reality, they finally decided to act. Now, we're going to examine the full impact of their decision against Gianni Infantino and the Argentine Football Association, breaking down every important detail along the way. And this is only the beginning. But before we dive into the highly detailed facts behind these three major chapters of the story, it's important to step back and look at the bigger picture of how this entire tournament unfolded. Our team began documenting what we believed was clear tournament favoritism during the opening weeks of the 2026 World Cup, starting with the leaked audio from the Dallas VAR room that raised major questions about the Mexico versus England match. From referees being suspended through late-night emergency announcements, to 5 separate quarterfinal controversies that disappeared almost overnight, and finally to the confusing decisions and rule interpretations surrounding the final itself. Then came the debate over the appointment of Fagani, the controversial challenges involving Paredes, and Gianni Infantino's widely criticized speech during the medal ceremony. For weeks, this was one of the few places presenting these stories with the level of detail and consistency they deserved. It was the kind of reporting many believed mainstream media avoided because of their close financial ties to FIFA sponsors, choosing caution even while many observers questioned what was happening. Today, that long investigation appears to have received its strongest institutional recognition yet. The Ethics Committee has now stepped in. The same concerns we highlighted throughout the tournament are now reportedly reflected in the committee's own internal investigation. And the sanctions announced today are being presented as consequences many believed should have arrived much earlier in the competition. At the center of the case against Argentina is the alleged network of close relationships that we discussed in our earliest reports. According to the investigation, it involved a pattern of mutual favors between outgoing FIFA leadership and the Argentine Football Association. This is presented not as speculation, but as the central conclusion reached during the committee's inquiry, which reportedly uncovered questionable connections between Infantino and the AFA. Investigators believe those relationships may have influenced key refereeing decisions during some of Argentina's most important matches under Scaloni. Think back to the leaked Dallas VAR audio, which exposed the confusion inside the review room during Mexico versus England. Then consider the disputed officiating decisions in Argentina versus Switzerland, including the controversial second yellow card shown to the Swiss player, despite rules that many argued prevented VAR from becoming involved. Add to that Enzo Fernandez's goal, which many critics believed was approved without the level of review such an important moment required. Week after week, this growing body of evidence was examined in detail before eventually reaching the Ethics Committee. Public pressure continued to build until it became impossible to ignore. With the allegations growing stronger and the scrutiny becoming more intense, the committee ultimately opened the first formal charge in the case, focusing on that network of influence and backroom dealings that allegedly turned World Cup officiating into a tool serving the interests of powerful figures behind the scenes. The second charge is based on an incident witnessed live by millions during the World Cup final itself. It was a sequence captured from nearly every camera angle during the most watched football broadcast of the year. Leandro Paredes allegedly confronting Gavi and Eric Garcia just as Spain began celebrating after the final whistle. It was the same footage we examined in detail. The contact from behind and the heated shoves during the celebrations became the focus of intense debate. According to the disciplinary code, such behavior can fall under violent or unsporting conduct. FIFA had previously established strict disciplinary standards in high-profile cases involving players such as Kylian Mbappe and Jude Bellingham. Because of that, the Ethics Committee reportedly decided to include Paredes' case within the broader investigation involving the AFA, adding even greater weight to the proceedings. If upheld, the consequences could prove significant both financially and competitively, with effects that might follow Argentina for years. But what comes next is even more surprising. Before examining the reported sanctions against Argentina and Gianni Infantino, it's important to understand what this investigation could actually mean for the AFA beyond the headlines. This is far more than a symbolic document. It marks the beginning of a lengthy process that could place enormous financial, sporting, and institutional pressure on the federation in the years ahead. Financially, speculation suggests that any eventual fine could be substantial. Although no official figures have been confirmed, reports citing sources close to the ethics committee have fueled widespread discussion about the possible scale of the penalties. Looking back at FIFA's disciplinary history, some observers believe it could rank among the largest sanctions ever considered against a South American federation. On the sporting side, one proposal reportedly under discussion involves restrictions on official competition, a measure that, if ever approved, could affect qualification for the next World Cup. Think about the irony for a moment. The same team that critics claimed benefited throughout this tournament could now face severe consequences through the very disciplinary system now reviewing those allegations. There is a remarkable twist to this entire story because the institution leading the investigation is FIFA itself. The same organization whose previous leadership is now being questioned over decisions made during the tournament. The same body responsible for approving the controversial regulations surrounding the final and appointing Fagani despite widespread debate over his record. And the same organization whose leadership faced criticism following the trophy ceremony involving Messi. Now that very governing body is reportedly pursuing what some believe could become one of the most significant disciplinary actions ever directed at a national football association. At first glance, it almost appears carefully orchestrated, but supporters of this view argue it is something entirely different. They believe it reflects an organization trying to protect its own survival. As public scrutiny intensified and the pressure became impossible to ignore, FIFA reportedly found itself needing to demonstrate decisive action in order to restore confidence and calm the growing outrage surrounding the tournament public, even if the person being sacrificed is ultimately the product of decisions made by the very officials now passing judgment. In many ways, FIFA now appears to be punishing Argentina for a system that critics argue FIFA itself helped create. That is the conclusion many people reach after carefully examining every layer of this controversy. But don't misunderstand this analysis. It does not erase Argentina's responsibility or suggest complete innocence. The accusations involving Paredes' confrontation with Gavi and Eric Garcia remain central to the investigation, and many believe the Argentine Football Association benefited from officiating decisions that appeared to favor the team throughout the tournament. Those allegations stand on their own, regardless of who is delivering the punishment. In the end, justice does not require a flawless prosecutor. What matters is whether the evidence can withstand scrutiny, and that is exactly what investigators are now examining. Infantino ultimately became the most visible figure to absorb the backlash, particularly since reports about his removal from power had already been circulating for weeks. What we are witnessing now is being described as the final removal of his executive authority, accompanied by financial and criminal investigations that, over the coming weeks, are expected to determine whether he faces only internal sporting sanctions or far more serious legal consequences. According to these claims, Infantino's time at the center of future World Cups is over. And if the ongoing investigations ultimately support the allegations currently under review, the consequences for his future could become even more severe than today's disciplinary measures suggest. Then there is Lionel Messi. The closing chapter of his journey with Argentina has become, for many supporters, the most emotional and heartbreaking moment this tournament has produced. Not because retirement itself came as a complete surprise. At 39 years old, after everything that World Cup final represented, it always felt like the last great challenge of his international career. One final opportunity to chase something no player had ever achieved. A third World Cup title. And to place the ultimate finishing touch on what many consider the greatest collection of achievements in football history. What makes this farewell so painful is the controversy surrounding it. Instead of leaving with a triumphant celebration, Messi's goodbye has become intertwined with endless debate, political tension, and institutional turmoil. He departs without lifting the trophy, without the iconic image many believed his legendary career deserved. Instead, his final chapter arrives while his national federation faces intense scrutiny, while questions continue to surround the actions of teammates, and while criticism aimed at FIFA's leadership only deepens the sense that the tournament ended under a cloud of controversy. Even so, football history will always remember his extraordinary assist to Lautaro in the dramatic semi-final. a perfectly weighted pass delivered with remarkable vision under enormous pressure. Many supporters already describe it as one of the finest moments ever produced by a 39-year-old player on the World Cup stage. According to reports surrounding the aftermath, emotions boiled over inside Argentina's dressing room. Messi reportedly confronted Enzo and several teammates before making it clear that he wanted no part in defending Paredes' actions during the post-match incident when speaking publicly. And now he says goodbye to the Argentina national team, while one of the biggest institutional controversies of his career continues to unfold. It is an incredibly painful ending for a player many consider the greatest footballer of all time. Not the farewell countless fans imagined, but the one shaped by everything happening around him. The explanation Messi gave for his retirement reflected exactly what his emotions showed after the final whistle. He admitted that he could no longer continue representing a team whose image had become overwhelmed by controversy. According to these reports, he did not want his name connected to a structure facing serious accusations, one that investigators were now examining over alleged practices he could never support. With that decision, the final against Spain officially became the last match of his international career. 39 years old, for World Cups, the triumph of 2022, 2 heartbreaking final defeats, and now a painful conclusion in 2026. A farewell that felt both inevitable and deeply emotional. Messi is leaving Argentina's national team, and football supporters around the world are mourning the end of an unforgettable era. After spending weeks following every twist in this story and examining the controversies that many believe surrounded this tournament, we say goodbye to Messi with the admiration and respect that nearly 4 decades of football excellence have earned. At the same time, there remains a sense of frustration among those who believe this final chapter failed to reflect the legacy he built throughout his remarkable career, arguing that circumstances beyond his control ultimately shaped the ending. And now I want to speak directly to all of you, the fans who have spent years following this sport from the stands and from your homes, the loyal audience that returns week after week because you believe in hearing perspectives that many feel the mainstream media rarely explores. Those of you who stayed with us from the first leaked discussions surrounding the Dallas VAR controversy all the way to Messi's retirement announcement, and the investigation involving the Argentine Football Association have watched every chapter unfold. You were here when we argued that the growing network of alleged favoritism surrounding this tournament would eventually collapse under the weight of mounting scrutiny because no controversy of that size could remain hidden forever. You stood by our analysis throughout the tournament, and today many believe those concerns have reached their defining moment. With Infantino reportedly removed from power, Argentina facing major disciplinary proceedings, and Messi bringing his international career to an emotional close, the story has reached what many see as its dramatic conclusion. Let us break everything down into 3 major takeaways. First, the reported punishment against Argentina and the dramatic collapse of Infantino's leadership mark what many are calling one of the biggest political earthquakes ever to follow a World Cup final. And football has certainly witnessed major scandals before. Everyone remembers FIFA's long history of controversies and corruption allegations. What makes this case different, according to supporters of this view, is the sheer volume of evidence that accumulated throughout the tournament, including leaked audio recordings, heavily disputed refereeing decisions, and the post-match confrontations after the final whistle. Together, they created what many believe has become one of the largest and most public investigations FIFA has ever been forced to confront. Second, there is a striking irony in the fact that FIFA is now reportedly taking action against Argentina over a system that critics argue FIFA itself helped build. In many ways, it reflects the contradictions of modern football. The governing body now appears to be confronting the very structure its own leadership is accused of creating. None of this erases Argentina's own responsibility for the conduct of its players and officials during the tournament. Instead, supporters of this perspective argue it demonstrates how deeply the problems extended throughout the competition, beginning with those at the highest levels of the sport and eventually affecting everyone involved. From administrators to players, every major figure now finds themselves under scrutiny, and many believe the ethics committee must enforce its rules consistently without exceptions or favoritism. Third, Messi's departure from the Argentina national team stands as one of the most emotional and heartbreaking farewells any football legend has experienced. Not because of something he personally did wrong, but because many believe the circumstances surrounding his final tournament left him with no honorable alternative. According to this perspective, the system that was supposedly meant to benefit him ultimately collapsed at the very moment it mattered most, denying him the ending so many supporters had imagined. Instead of celebrating one last triumph, his farewell became inseparable from controversy, disappointment, and institutional turmoil. Countless fans believe he deserved a completely different final chapter. For them, football still owes Messi the farewell that his extraordinary career earned. It remains one of the saddest conclusions this tournament could possibly have delivered to a player widely regarded as one of the greatest in history. Now it's your turn. Share your opinion in the comments below. Do you believe FIFA still has the moral authority to discipline Argentina after facing accusations over its own role in these events? And with Messi's international career now over, can Argentina rebuild a competitive future without the player who shaped an entire generation of its football identity? I want to hear what you think because this community has always been built around honest, passionate, and in-depth football discussion. If you've made it this far, then you already understand what this channel is all about. This is where we question the stories many believe the mainstream media avoids because of powerful corporate interests and financial relationships. We don't shield influential executives, and we don't stay silent when the institutions surrounding the sport's biggest stars fall into controversy, creating moments that passionate football fans deserve to understand through detailed analysis, open discussion, and complete transparency. Just football face-to-face without holding back. If you believe this conversation deserves to reach more people, share this analysis with others. I think about the Spanish supporters who watched what they believe were repeated attempts to derail their team's World Cup triumph, only to now witness FIFA turning its attention inward through this reported institutional shakeup. For them, Ferran Torres' dramatic goal in the 110th minute represented far more than a narrow 1-0 victory. It became a defining moment that symbolized resilience under extraordinary pressure. I also think about Argentina's supporters, now watching Messi's emotional farewell unfold at the same time their federation faces the biggest controversy in its history. Many of them are left wondering whether his retirement was truly unavoidable, or whether the Albiceleste still needed his brilliance to rebuild after one of the darkest chapters the national team has ever experienced. And then there are football fans across every corner of the world following what many describe as the most chaotic World Cup ever played, trying to determine whether the Ethics Committee's actions truly represent the beginning of meaningful reform inside FIFA, or simply another attempt to calm public outrage without addressing the deeper issues at the heart of the organization. Leave a like if you believe real accountability should extend far beyond Argentina and reach every level of the football system that this tournament placed under the spotlight. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because the biggest stories are still unfolding. The full impact of this reported shakeup inside FIFA, the future of an Argentina entering a new era without Messi, and the major transfer battles already taking shape across Europe are only beginning. You'll find every update right here. In our next episode, we'll take an exclusive look at how football federations around the world have reacted to the reported sanctions against Argentina and the dramatic collapse of Infantino's leadership. Today we focused on the first stage of what supporters describe as a major institutional overhaul emerging from FIFA's headquarters in Zurich, and what Messi's departure truly means for Argentina moving forward. Who steps into the enormous void left behind by the greatest captain in Argentine football history? These are the questions we'll continue exploring with detailed analysis you won't easily find elsewhere. Here we speak directly without outside influence, examining every development and asking the difficult questions many believe deserve answers. According to these claims, Gianni Infantino has now been pushed aside while facing serious ongoing investigations. Argentina is confronting what some describe as the toughest disciplinary action ever considered against a South American football federation. Lionel Messi has officially closed the chapter on his international career, bringing an emotional end to one of the greatest journeys the sport has ever witnessed. Meanwhile, Spain celebrates its second World Cup title, closing the curtain on what many consider the most dramatic, tense, and controversial tournament in modern football history.